Good evening, cult members, and welcome to the Pop Culture Cult. I'm Sean.
I'm Janice.
And this is episode something. We had a really great two-part episode last week. Talked about some news, talked about Kevin Feige, all the things that he's going to be doing in his near future, what that could all possibly mean for Lucasfilm and Disney and the MCU, and we had a really great, awesome conversation. And technology keeps winning.
There was a pop, and then it all went downhill from there.
There was no smoke.
There wasn't any smoke, but...
Yeah, I don't know what happened.
I don't either.
We lost most of the audio. I think I've tried to recover the first half. I know the second half is there with the Kevin Feige stuff, but I probably should have just released the Kevin Feige stuff with something on there going, hi, technology sucks. Here's the rest of the conversation we had. But so we actually did record last week. And if you're on the podcast feed, go to the YouTube channel because it's on there.
Yeah.
So that's how it works. We're going to do two stories this week. One is going to be, we're going to review Joker.
Yes.
And it will be probably a spoilery kind of talk. Because there's some stuff I want to talk about that happens in this movie, and I don't know how you could do it without talking about what happens. I think it's
right.
Fair. I think it's the best way to put it. First, we want to talk about how Tom Holland. We don't deserve Tom Holland. The boy's gorgeous and super nice and
right, and talented and
athletic.
And
I hate nice people. And talented people.
Right. Be so much easier if he wasn't nice, but...
Or maybe just a little bit ugly, too.
Right.
He takes his shirt off and he's ripped. And he's like, what, 23, 22. So we're going to talk about Tom Holland, who was the number one reason why the MCU and Sony got back on the bargaining table.
Yep.
Story came out from THR last week that after... There was a lot of discussion that had gone between Sony and Marvel before the news actually broke that they were breaking up and that the Spider-Man deal was no longer going to work with the MCU.
Right.
And they were fighting about percentages of profit and who put in money for production and toys and all this stuff.
Right.
And they were trying to renegotiate stuff, and they couldn't fix it. And so Alan Horn... just instead of trying to counter Sony, walked away.
Right.
And then it came out in August that, this was all happening. And Tom Holland had to go to D23 the week that the story dropped, and to promote his, is it Abominable? No, it's the next Pixar movie.
Okay.
So he was there to promote that, and so of course it's the week when everything broke, and
right. So that's all anybody could talk about.
So he said, "I love you 3000" when he was there. So come to find out, he went to the head of Sony, Tom Rothman, and threw his weight around, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
They're working on a Uncharted film that he's supposed to play a young Nathan Drake, and so he threw his clout around with Sony, and then turned around and called Bob Iger. Forget Feige, forget Alan Horn, forget everybody.
Right.
He called Walt Disney's private line where
right.
Bob Iger's, the bat phones ran, and told him and Tom Rothman from Sony to sit down and figure it out.
Yep.
And what he used as leverage, not leverage, but as information, was the social media outpour.
Yeah.
From all the fans and how much they all wanted it.
Yeah.
And then, like not last Friday, but the Friday before, we get the story that they're back on the table and they've negotiated something, and Tom Holland's back in the MCU, and he's also going to be in Venom, and they're doing this whole Spideyverse thing. And so what do you think?
I think that the Bob
Iger?
Hart? No.
Alan Horn.
Alan Horn. There you go. I think he's an idiot. I don't know where they thought they were going with. They had that whole section of the park, the Marvel experience or whatever they're calling it.
Yeah.
That Spider-Man was like front and center of
he's
their
a major part of it.
of their design, and they're just like, nope, we're gonna walk away. And
Alan Horn has 2 modes. Everything is fine, and get rid of everything.
yeah,
Like he did the same thing with James Gunn, and he did the same thing with this discussion about trying to make it work with Sony,
right.
Which we all knew was kind of a miracle deal as it was.
Right, but Sony was never going to be able to do what Marvel was able to do with Spider-Man just because Sony doesn't have a Marvel. Right? I mean, nobody was going to be able to do that other than Marvel at that point in time. And, Peter becomes a major part in Endgame.
Yeah. Actually, and everybody's been saying that Peter Parker is going to be. I mean, they even talk about it in Far From Home. Like, he's the next Iron Man. He's kind of the de facto leader of the Avengers, is going to be the de facto.
Right.
And if they're going to skew a little bit younger with the next phase of Phase 4 and Phase 5 and working their way to Galactus, which is what everybody thinks they're going to do. You got to have Spider-Man in that. You've got Tom Holland, who loves playing the character, obviously.
Right.
And they're allowing him now to go out and do other things. And so I'm happy that they got it figured out. But it just really makes me mad that CEOs, I really think don't care about the creative process.
Right.
Or the storytelling process.
Right.
I mean, it's not their job. Their job is the bottom line, and the bottom line wasn't working out for both companies. And so I understand that point, but I just sometimes you got to put, instead of Disney making $1 billion and Sony making $500 million, maybe both sides make $750,000 or $750 million. Just like, make it work. Like it's just
Well, and this is now the second time that
Alan Horn,
his decision has had to have been gone back on,
reversed.
And I was telling him they just Disney needs to get rid of him, and they don't fire guys with, in his position. They just give them a lot of money and ask them to go away. Yeah. So I think it's time for Disney to give him a lot of money and ask him to go away. He
is a old school fire and brimstone, by the book kind of.
And it's just not working.
That's not
today.
That's not the modern world. I'm sorry. Speaking of modern world and storytelling of characters, we're gonna have a full spoiler talk of Joker. So we appreciate you spending 9 minutes with us as we talk about Tom Holland and how amazing he is. If you have not seen Joker, we're going to spoil the shit out of this. So you have been warned. If you want to move on, we understand. I'm not going to be upset about that. Go see the movie. Come back. Apparently, everybody saw the movie this weekend. So if you're one of the 5 people who didn't see it, so we're gonna spoilers. Joker dies in the end.
Nice. Now you really have to go see it, find out whether or not that's true.
Is it true? We talked about this movie on the way home, and then I thought about it a lot. I think there's 2 things that can be talked about with this movie. It's the movie itself, how it's shot, how it's performed, the story itself and the storytelling aspects and everything. And then there's the reaction that everybody was having before the movie came out is, I think, a part of the discussion that has to be had at some point in time. But let's talk about the movie first.
Okay.
Overall, what did you think?
So like it seems weird.
Right. I loved it.
But it was really, really good. And if you've listened or watched us, one of the things we talk about is, like if we've binged an entire season of a show, do we, like, as soon as we're done, want to go watch it again? That's kind of our litmus test for how much we liked it. And on the way home, I was like, I don't think I could see this movie again.
Yeah.
Today, I actually said to somebody at work who did go see it over the weekend, I think I could go see this movie again. It took me from Thursday to today to get there, but there's a lot of stuff that I want to see again. It's first time you're busy looking, at whatever's going on or whatever, and not paying attention to kind of some of the stuff that's going on in the background. And there was just so much that I think some of the twists, because there are several,
yes,
aren't going to be obviously as impactful once you've seen it once, but maybe going back and watching it again, knowing some of that stuff, you might catch something, some clues and stuff like that. Yeah.
A couple of the guys at work asked me if I had seen it already, and I told them that I did, and my answer to them was, if it was good, I said, it's really good. It's a hard watch. And I, like you, have gone back around to, I think I'd like to see it again. This is not necessarily a movie that I think we can go back to, and like we rewatched Endgame this weekend.
Right, it's not something you pop in the background and watch 50 million times.
Right. It is a deep magnifying glass look at how mental health is not handled well in the public eye. And that's a very hard conversation to have in the world right now. And I understand a lot of the criticism that people were giving this movie, because it's a very easy answer to say somebody's going to see this movie and see themselves in that character, and they're going to take that as inspiration. And it's a very easy answer to go from A to B to C to get there. The problem is that the people who are saying that, I don't feel like I didn't know I was going here with this part of the story, but I'm just going to go ahead and go with it. I feel the people who are saying that are trying to not do a proper look at what mental health is in the country right now.
Yeah, and I don't feel like people that are saying that actually watched the movie.
Yeah.
Because maybe if you are very mentally unbalanced, maybe you could get there, but it's a big long journey, and it's not a pretty journey. I mean, there's some some killing, and there's people being awful to him, and
his mother is a piece of work, and
but she wasn't, and then she was one of the twists. So I don't, it's like Heath Ledger's Joker. I would see people associating with that more than this one.
Yeah.
Because it's, like I said, it's just a whole journey. He just starts out as kind of this sad guy, and then you start to realize that he has this illness, brain issue that makes him laugh it's kind of like Tourette's almost,
Yeah.
where he laughs inappropriately, and then you start to feel sorry for him because he lives at home with his mom, and people are beating him up, and all of this, and then he kills. It's this whole journey. Who's going to go in and associate with that? Like, unless all that stuff happened to you.
And I have a hard time with people, taking, like, saying that this is an ultra violent movie, or it's a hard movie to watch because of all the violence in it. The violence is not any worse or less than, like, John Wick.
Yeah.
Or
I would say it's much less.
I mean, there's one particular shot at the end that's very jarring on purpose.
Right.
Because of the circumstances of how we get there and why we get there and what the Joker is actually trying to say and do in that point.
Right.
That's very jarring. And that aspect has been done in real life. And
right.
So I get why people are upset about that. But I have felt all along that the criticism of this movie by people, I've said this before. We have many friends with some version of some kind of mental issue, whether it be bipolar or straight depression or Asperger's or we have several friends, some of them in our family, who have had these issues, and so we have a direct relationship to how to deal with this stuff. So when I see somebody like this, I'm not kidding. I wanted to give Arthur a hug the whole time.
Yeah.
Like, I just wanted to, I know you're awkward, I know you're weird, but you seem like a pretty good guy. Let's go have a beer. Let's go hang out together.
Yeah.
And this is our biggest argument with people who complained about Eddie Redmayne and Fantastic Beasts. You've never met anybody with social anxiety ever?
Yeah. Well, and I think that people just don't. This is potentially what has happened with some, or maybe all, of these people who go out and these mass shooters, right? It's the really bad day, right? Which is what they kind of said they based this.
It's kind of the Killing Joke.
The Killing Joke. Yeah.
It's not a direct adaptation of the Killing Joke, but the premise is there that you could just have one bad day,
right?
And and you go off the rails from there,
right? And this is not over a day, but it's the same thing. I mean, he starts off with he's just a normal person,
trying to be a normal person and have a job, and I love the way they start this movie. Because it's Arthur putting the makeup on from the trailer where he does his tongue and stuff like that, and he does the smile with his teeth and trying to make himself happy and stuff
when he's crying.
And that whole scene is narrated by the news in the background,
right? And
the news about Gotham. Now this is kind of set in the 80s.
I think 70s.
Well, it's 70s, 80s, but it's got that time period like Detroit, when Detroit started to fall apart, or New York when it started to fall apart, and the 70s and 80s.
Right.
It's kind of got that time period. So everything that the news was talking about is all negative.
Right. Well, it's the
homelessness is up, and unemployment is up, and their crime rates are up,
the garbage strike, which actually happened in New York in the 70s, and downtown, the square, Times Square. I'm like, Madison Square. No, that's not it. Times Square.
That's the arena.
Was, like a very, not a place you would want to go. Like, tourists didn't go there, and it was a bunch of porn houses, and,
And they directly reference that visually in the streets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so when they start with that kind of thing, and here's a guy who has had issues, has had a mental breakdown, spent time at Arkham. With all of that, and you just start adding on to it, and he can't keep a job, and his mom he's taking care of his mom, and their entire life is to watch Murray Franklin at the talk show host, and who's played by Robert De Niro, and just like you can just kind of see how it just everything starts to he gets jumped by some kids, and then that leads to one of the other guys giving him a gun, and he takes the gun to a hospital for kids, and the gun falls out, so then he gets fired, and it's just like one thing after another after another after another after another. One of the things I want to talk about, we're going to talk about the performance, but one of the things I want to talk about is for me, the way this movie is shot is amazing. It's not big epic scope shots.
No, there's a lot of close-ups.
A lot of close-ups, and a lot of very Arthur's always in very confined space. So you're looking through a doorway into a very small room, or he's always and it's always very darkish and muted colors and stuff like that. And as he goes along and starts to accept who he is more and more and more, that scope of rooms gets bigger, and the rooms become bigger, and the atmosphere becomes brighter, and it was just a subtle excuse me, dinner. It's a subtle thing that I love that stuff. I love that visual storytelling of explaining how a man comes out of the box without saying it. It's exposition. But it's
he ends, well, he doesn't end, but the big end before he ends up back in Arkham is him standing on the car. He's in the middle of Times Square or whatever. He's got all the room now, and it's he's,
and everybody's looking at him. And instead of before, everybody was looking away from him, and he was very kind of closed off. He's out with his arms stretched out. It's such a cool shot, and I think that a lot of people, because of the conversation we were just having about having this conversation about mental illness in this movie and dealing with that, they're going to miss a lot of that kind of story structure and cinematography and color palettes, and everybody's performance is on the top level and hard stop. Everybody shows up. Robert De Niro shows up occasionally to movies to get a paycheck. But he is great in this role.
He really is.
And he's in a super small role. And Zazie Beetz is in a super small role. But what she's able to do to go back and forth in the different stories that's going on in Arthur's head, and her being able to portray that is amazing. But Joaquin Phoenix is in the lead for the Oscar. He's in the lead for everything. What he's able to do physically with his body.
He lost like 50 pounds.
Who was I watching? Collider Live today. Roca talked about how he did things with his body because he lost so much weight that you could see his rib cage and his spine and stuff like that. And he would do stuff with his body, and he would just be alien. He's not human. And I just what he was able to do and what he was able to pull off, and that laugh.
That was very Joker, very very much.
And it's, that's the Joker laugh is iconic. That's one of it's like his white face and the laugh and the green hair are like his known things, and so you have to nail the laugh. But the laugh is terrifying, saddening, and creepy all at the same time.
It's a laugh without mirth.
M-Y...
M-I-R-T-H.
Okay, all right. I'm going to have to look that word up. Thank you. To steal a thing from CinemaWins, your CinemaWins word of the day, mirth. Your pop culture cult word of the day. I don't know. We haven't seen Marriage Story yet, and we haven't seen Jojo Rabbit yet.
Yeah.
And Ford versus Ferrari. I'm just trying to do movies that festivals and people are saying the performances are really good. So
we haven't seen Judy yet because it's playing in one theater.
Yeah.
That's anywhere close to us.
Yeah.
So
we're trying. But
closer.
From what everybody is saying, this is the best performance of the year, male or female.
Yeah.
And it's coming in a comic book movie.
Right.
Now, that's the last thing I really want to talk about is this is not your father's comic book movie.
No.
This is I hate to use this reference, but it's The Boys. It's very much like taking The Boys isn't a good reference. If they do Why the Last Man, it's
an adult look at and conversation wrapped in a comic book character.
So the thing I thought about I was trying to say to the guys earlier at work, and I wasn't able to really get it out because my brain was end of the day at work or whatever. But this movie is about mental illness. It's the pill that the society needs to see in mental illness. That's the pill. But the trick is to go see this movie to talk about mental illness. They wrap it in a chocolate wrapping of
Right.
a comic book character.
Right.
And so, oh, cool, it's a Joker. Everybody loves the Joker. He's a great character. Mark Hamill's got a great laugh, and Heath Ledger was amazing, and Cesar Romero. And everybody's we love the Joker, and everybody loves cosplaying the Joker, and they love the Joker-Harley Quinn relationship and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to go see the Joker movie, and then you get there, and you get done, and you're like, oh, I feel like ass, because this movie wasn't the joke. I mean, it's the Joker movie. I mean, freaking Batman's in it. Okay, Bruce Wayne's in it. It's not Batman. But it's a sugar-coated pill to have this conversation.
But in real life, if comic books were real, this is who he would be, and this is, I mean, his relationship with Harley is borderline abuse, definitely emotional abuse, probably on both sides. I mean, these are not pretty characters, and so if you're going to make a real live Joker, this is how he gets there.
And I think that's what a lot of people have struggled with, at least from where I'm sitting, and people's reaction is this was a very real look.
It makes people uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. And if anything, if this helps continue the conversation about mental health and how mental health actually needs to be an issue that's talked about and worked on and not be legislated by the government and stuff like that. Like, if that's what this does, then Todd Phillips, you can have my money for the rest of time.
He should get a Nobel Peace Prize if that's what it
and an Oscar
to do.
He should get a Golden Globe, an Oscar, and a Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, that's what it comes down to. But let's give it a score. I'm really going to do this, aren't I?
I'm giving it a 4.5.
I'm giving it a 5. I've been thinking about it for 4 days.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's not a 5. A 5 for me is I'm going to go back and rewatch it 17,000 times and know every character and every line and everything like that.
Yeah.
But this is probably going to be my one exception to the rule. That it's so well done. Such a great social commentary. Performances, the story aspects, and it made $96 million domestically this weekend.
Yep.
In 3 days. 3 days, it made $96 million.
Yeah, and
233, I think, overall.
Overall, yeah, which I wasn't expecting it to get a huge international audience, and it did.
It just crushed overseas.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought the opposite, but apparently not.
And they made this movie for like $35 or $40 million.
Yeah, awesome. They're talking about what they can do next with it.
And that was the last thing. We've got 20 seconds before I have to do all the goodbyes. Joaquin Phoenix, for a long time, said, no, I just want to do the one-off. And he came out this weekend and said, I've talked to Todd about maybe what could we do moving forward.
Yeah.
Which means there's a possibility that you could do something because they kind of set up some Batman stuff in there.
Yeah. You've got a couple years because Bruce is like 12 in this movie. So you've got probably 20 years before you need to introduce him.
You can go forward. So I'm just going to run the commercial. So we want to thank everybody for listening. Please subscribe and all that stuff. And until next time, do what the commercial says. Good night now. Hello, cult members. Like what you've heard on this podcast? Then please subscribe and follow us here. You can also find us on Facebook at the Pop Culture Cult. We're on Instagram at PopCultureCult1. And we're on Twitter at Pop_Cult1. We're also on YouTube at PopCultureCult and on the Stardust app under PopCultureCult. Please help us by liking, following, and subscribing to everything we have. This helps us build a bigger and better cult of pop culture.